At the beginning of 2021, SpaceX pulled off a unique mission that broke records. Onboard were human ashes which were traveling to lower Earth orbit. This service was arranged by the company Celestis, and they even offered to send ashes to the moon for just $12,500, which is cheap in terms of spaceflight. But this wasn't the most impressive part of the mission. In total, this mission launched 143 satellites into orbit, breaking the previous record of 104 set by India. This is part of a new service that SpaceX now offers called Rideshare, which allows smaller satellites to hitch a ride with other satellites, drastically reducing the cost. If you had a 500-kilogram satellite in the 80s and wanted to launch it into Earth's orbit, you didn't have a lot of options. Back then, there were no cheap, reusable rockets. So, as the owner of the satellite, you had to pay the entire cost of building the rocket, plus all of the launch costs. Up until fairly recently, satellites have typically been large, bulky objects, only capable of doing one thing. You have to remember that the technology we have in our pockets used to take up entire rooms back in the 60s and 70s. But that's only part of the puzzle. Not only was the technology extremely oversized, building a satellite that had enough protection to survive the harsh conditions of outer space made them even bigger. We can now make satellites much smaller, and for a fraction of the cost. So with satellites getting smaller and rocket launches getting cheaper, it has allowed a new industry to grow at an incredible rate: the small satellite industry. Small sats are typically considered anything under 500 kilograms, but it's those that are under 50 kilograms that have become the most popular. These are known as nanosatellites, one of the most successful being the CubeSat. These are small research satellites made up of 10-centimeter modules. These are highly customizable and allow companies to perform research in space that would otherwise be far too expensive. They are often carried up to the International Space Station and deployed from there using a deployer, or literally being thrown by astronauts during a spacewalk. That's much faster than a baseball pitch. Over the last decade, the number of these CubeSats being launched has increased dramatically, and their popularity is set to grow even further. With incredibly low prices, satellites have moved away from traditional government rockets in favor of the cheap and reliable SpaceX. But in recent years, the amount of orders for big communication satellites has actually dropped, and SpaceX have had fewer customers to launch into space. Meanwhile, the new kid in town, Rocket Lab, has had an ever-growing launch schedule. With a much smaller and cheaper rocket, they can provide dedicated launches for a fraction of SpaceX's cost. Although the cost for each Falcon 9 is relatively cheap, it will still set you back at least $50 million for a single launch. This option is completely over the top if you're only launching a small satellite. Rocket Lab, on the other hand, charges just $7 million per launch. This has allowed Rocket Lab to flourish with the rise of the small sat market. And so, in order to keep up with its competitors, SpaceX started their Rideshare program. The idea is to offer 200-kilogram slots on the Falcon 9 in order to share the launch cost. Each 200-kilogram slot can be purchased for just $1 million, much cheaper than Rocket Lab's Electron rocket. But it gets even better. If you are launching a much smaller satellite and don't want to pay the full price, you don't have to. When a satellite company buys a slot on the Falcon 9, they can choose to share their slot with even smaller satellites, essentially creating rideshare within the rideshare. One of these companies is Spaceflight Inc., which offers CubeSat slots on the Falcon 9 for as little as $150,000. Although rideshare missions have been done before, they have never been done on this scale and for such a low price. Not only is SpaceX making space more affordable, they are making it more accessible than ever with an Uber-like booking system. First, you select the desired orbit of your satellite, the mass, and then choose from one of the scheduled flights. Then you have to specify how your satellite will fit onto the rocket.